Hello and welcome to the first episode of my Public Affairs in Practice podcast. The idea with this podcast is to look at the latest issues in public affairs, but really so that I can talk through the themes and some of the issues that I raise in my regular public affairs blog. My name is Stuart Thompson and I've worked in public affairs for over 20 years advising clients on their public affairs strategies, reputation management and sometimes with crises as well. I've also written a number of books on public affairs, so over the course of the podcasts we'll hopefully be able to talk through a number of the issues that people face in their day-to-day roles. And of course, if people want to email in with comments at any point, we can pick those up in future episodes as well. And in this first episode, I wanted to look at an issue that came up in some recent CIPR training that I undertook. And the discussion was around personal engagement plans. So the blog focuses on how the whole team can deliver a public affairs strategy. And it's often the case that a strategy will look at who key decision makers are, but the who does what amongst the team as a whole is often not really considered. So the idea of establishing personal engagement plans to give every member of the team a role in the strategy was one that was discussed. So of course, an overall public affairs programme will set strategic priorities for engagement. It'll look at top lists and targets, and primarily will also look at the asks of government as well. But each member of the team will want to play an active role in the delivery of that programme. Team members are all out and about at events and they're doing their own networking. They could be politically active themselves as well. So why not set them some specific tasks and targets as part of a personal engagement plan? And this could then be picked up on in their PDRs as well. So it doesn't just need to sit with the public affairs strategy. And of course, this is to say nothing of the personal and career development aspects as well. So all this can be rolled into a plan. And taking that type of approach really offers benefits not only to the individual but to the organisation as a whole as well. It could mean that more stakeholders are engaged and overlap avoided, and especially for smaller teams or those where limited resources are available, the people and the resources can be used much more effectively. But to ensure that the engagement is consistent and that mistakes are avoided, what do I think personal engagement plans should cover? Well, in the first instance, it should be clear about the allocation of stakeholders. The list shouldn't just be a random selection of those in the overall strategy. Instead, there should be some form of consistent theme among the target list and a prioritisation as well. So in other words, there should be a firm understanding or an explanation as to why a particular group of stakeholders has been selected as part of that individual's plan. So within the context of the overall programme, why have those stakeholders been selected? Now that could come down to a number of reasons, maybe covering a single issue, maybe a particular sector or a parliamentary group. But as long as there is a consistency and an explanation behind it, and that allocation then becomes clear. The second point is there should be a clarity of approach as well. The plan needs to cover details not just of the stakeholders, but also of the aims behind the proposed engagement, the purpose of the engagement, and the asks of each stakeholder as well. Now this isn't trying to overmanage the process, but really to provide comfort, especially those members of the team that may be less experienced, although it could be said that upwards management can also be important as well. The plans, though, shouldn't be overly ambitious. It's often better to establish some meaningful contact with a small number of stakeholders rather than simply ticking names off a long list but having no real understanding of their concerns. So by keeping the list focused and narrow, it means that the individuals involved can really sort of get to grips with those individuals and strike up a relationship with them. It's also really important to get the feedback mechanisms right. So capturing the right level of information is a critical aspect that really needs to be covered in a plan. That's true of all strategies across the piece as well. So this isn't just for the plans, but in this instance, the plan should explain what needs to come back from the engagement so that everything can be collected and collated centrally. That's especially true if any follow-up is promised as well. You should have to ensure that the contacts and the information are all fed back into the overall stakeholder programme for the organisation. Only under those circumstances can an assessment of future activity be made. So regular sharing will also help prevent target overlap as well, as sometimes these lines of delineation, which I've sort of set out quite straightforwardly, but it's not always that straightforward and then always that clear. So the more the feedback is, the more you can try and prevent that overlap from happening. And any reviews can also reallocate targets, but most importantly, they should take into account any changing policies or political priorities across government, but also internally as well. Other people's plans should also include an examination of other people's plans as well. at least a summary of what others in the team are up to. So maybe sharing the relevant relationship status. So that would enable some potentially useful cross-referrals to be facilitated and future actions to be allocated as well, but only on the basis that that information is really available to all the members of the team. Now, of course, each organisation will have its own idea of what a personal engagement plan will look like, but it seems to me that there are some positive benefits for the organisation, but particularly to the individuals involved, especially those at the start of their career. So I would encourage everyone to start looking at some personal engagement plans. So I think that sort of covers the issue that I wanted to capture in this podcast based on my blog. Of course, what we'll do over the next coming weeks is explore more blog posts, and feedback is also always very, very welcome. So I hope you've enjoyed this first episode. I'd like to have any thoughts that you have, so please do come back to me and obviously rate and review on your podcast subscription provider. Full details of the blog, myself, contact details are all in the accompanying notes to this show as well. So I hope you enjoyed the first episode. Please do subscribe, and we hope to see you again soon.